Hi, it's Miss Virgils, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about the 9/11 terrorist attacks, where I was and how it impacted me. I can tell you because it's a flashbulb memory, which is a memory that is just so vivid for you because there's an emotional significance, and definitely a national tragedy will be one of those moments. For me, I was in the 8th grade. I was in Mr. Williams' social studies class, and it was a normal day, of course, until we got a message on the PA system that something was happening. Like, you could just tell in the air that it was super serious. And because it was a social studies class, we were able to turn on the news, and we actually caught that second plane right on air. So it definitely gives you a deeper appreciation for first responders. It impacts you just a matter of going through TSA, trying to get on the airplane. You're taking your shoes off now. You have like nothing on your head, no jackets, the dog sniffing you. So all those things change, and it's little things that we don't see like every day. You have different rules where you can't yell bomb in an airport. You don't want to do that anyway, but you can't do it. It's illegal, and things like that. So it just gives you a greater appreciation for life.
So when 9/11 happened, I was in 7th grade, and I remember going to school and people were kind of panicked. And I'm originally from California, so like on the opposite side of the United States. But I remember my friends being kind of panicked, and I didn't know what was going on. And then I went into my first period, and I had first period social studies with Miss Saberos. She was awesome. And she was like, we're gonna watch the news because something really tragic happened. And this is before the era of cell phones, so like nobody was showing me a video or YouTube or anything like that because we didn't have that. So she put on the news, and then we watched the news the whole period, and I remember being really scared and just being like, wow, this is really happening. And then they kept throwing words like terrorist and we're gonna go to war and things that just sounded really extreme to me. And I just remember feeling pretty scared. And then most of my classes, the teachers kind of just put on the news. We kind of just put learning on hold, and we were just like kind of experiencing what was happening in the world. And I've said this many times now, but it really was just a scary day. And it just felt really uncomfortable. And then I just remember feeling really bad because I knew a lot of people were losing their lives. And I just remember thinking like, I could not imagine being in New York and knowing that somebody is lost or hurt or could have died. So yeah, that's what 9/11.
On September 11, 2001, I was a 6th grader in Griffin, Georgia. We were watching Channel 1, which is a news program for students, and we watched the planes hit the tower in real time. As an 11-year-old, I didn't really know what was going on, so I basically began to feel like we were always going to be attacked and that we weren't safe. And it took a while for me to get over that.
I was a junior in high school, and I remember coming out of my PE class, and one of my friends, Brittany, ran up to me in the group that was coming out of the class and said, a plane just flew into the World Trade Center. And I remember it sounded ridiculous because that wasn't something we imagined or something that was part of your reality in that point in time. But we all hurried to our next class, which was history, and the school had told us something was going on, but they didn't, I guess they were worried about us, and so they turned off TV and Wi-Fi and stuff like that. But our history teacher was kind of a rebel, and so he had a radio and he took it out and he put it on, and we spent the entire period just listening to Peter Jennings, who was a news reporter, describe what was happening in New York City, which for me and my friends was particularly impactful because we, as a class, had just been there the year before. We had been in the World Trade Center in the top. We had met people who worked there. We had gone up an elevator past floors of people who worked there every day. And I'll never forget when I got home that night and was watching the TV for the first time, seeing it actually happen visually. Those two planes flying into those buildings and those buildings disappearing as quickly as they did, with all the people that were in them and all the lives that were affected, is something that left a big mark on me, and I think everybody else anywhere in New York, or who knew anybody in New York at that time. And so when we go there as a class, when we visit that space, that kind of hallowed ground, it's a sad space, but it's also right next to the next tower that they built after it happened. And whether you've seen it or whether you get to see it one day as a junior on that trip, they built back something that's even bigger. And I think that really represents what I love most about being a New Yorker is that kind of standoffishness and sense of pride in our city and our state that nothing gets us down. And so if you're going to take something from us, we're going to build it back even better and even stronger. And while September 11th is a tough day to remember, it's also something that I think encourages us all to go on believing and following the things that we believe in as Americans.
So my 9/11 story is, I remember waking up on the day that it happened. I was in 8th grade, so I'm, now you can figure out how old I am. But I was in 8th grade, and I remember I was getting ready for school, and then on the news we saw that the first plane had hit the first tower. And at first we were like, wow, this is just crazy, like coincidental thing that happened. Super sad, super scary, but it's just an accident. So I was still getting ready to go to school, and then we saw, like right before I was gonna leave, the second plane hit the second tower, and it was like in an instant you knew it wasn't an accident, and it was an intentional threat and an intentional thing that was happening. And so I remember that day, my mom was like, you're not going to school, like we don't know what's happening, so stay home. And I just stayed home that day, and with me and my mom and my younger brother, and we just watched the news all day and tried to figure out what was happening. And after that happened, there was 2 more planes that went down, and just extremely scary. I don't have any family or friends that lived in New York at the time, so we didn't know anyone that was directly impacted, but my mom's family is from Pennsylvania, and one of the planes did go down in Pennsylvania, so we were just trying to call, make sure that our family was okay. We didn't think anybody was affected, and fortunately for me, I didn't know anyone who was directly impacted, but it was just a scary day. And I think looking back now, so many years later, it's crazy to think how much that's impacted our life, like how different traveling is. Like for those of us who traveled before 9/11 and travel now, we know the impacts, but for people who were born after the event, you just kind of never understand what it was like before. And so it was just a really sad day, and even to this point in the future, whenever I think about it, it's emotional. It makes you sad, but I think seeing how our country kind of banded together afterwards is like the positive that came out of it.
This is Mr. Wozniak. I've been asked to speak about my memories related to the September 11th terrorist attacks, and to talk about where I was and how it impacted me. I was in the 7th grade, and I was driving, my dad was driving me and my brothers to school in the morning, and we were listening to it unfold on the radio. And I remember my teachers kind of scrapped their intended lesson plans for the day, and we all just watched the news like all day, every period, because our teachers were trying to impress upon us the historical momentousness of the occasion. I was so young at the time, 12 or whatever, that I didn't understand what was going on at all. But I do remember seeing adults who were very worried, and people who were very solid and sturdy in my life who were worried and who were shaken. And I remember that really impacting me, seeing people who were so unflustered and so brave in normal circumstances exhibiting real fear.
So in 2001, I was 20 years old, and when the Twin Towers were hit by the planes, I was asleep because I was in California. And what I vividly recall is hearing my phone ring constantly over and over, and at the time I had an answering machine, and this was 2001. And finally I woke up and I listened to the messages that were left, and it was like everyone talking about, you need to turn on the news, you need to turn on the news. And turning on the news and seeing what I guess it was the most traumatic was watching people throw themselves from the top of the building because of the fire. And when I walked out of my apartment, it felt like the air was heavy, and that like we all were facing this trauma together, and it still stings, and it's still like, I think everyone who went through that experience, either in person or, you know, worrying about their family in New York, it's still there. You know, we were always just thinking, you know, is this ever gonna happen?